So we just watched the 4th season premiere of Madam Secretary.
How was it?
It was good. It's a good episode. Yeah. How did you initially get involved with the show coming into the 1st season?
I think it was pretty straightforward. My agent sent me a script and said, you know, here's this thing, you probably won't want to be involved with it. And I read it, and I thought, I liked this guy, Henry McCord, a lot. He wasn't in the pilot very much, but I thought that there was the seed of something really good there. Because he, you know, and I've said this before, I found that he was a competent man and a man who was confident enough to not be intimidated by his wife, who was about to become a very important person in the government. And I thought that, frankly, that made him a real man, you know, a man who had a lot of strength to be able to say, go, babe, be as big as you can be.
And how would you say the character, how would you say the character has evolved over the years? I mean, he started out as a religion professor, and now he's working for the CIA. I mean, was that just kind of a natural progression to kind of get you more involved in the storylines, you know, the not just be at home, you know, cooking the pancakes? And
well, I cooked a lot in the 1st season.
Yeah.
I think that, you know, the way that Barbara Hall pitched the show to me was that Henry was going to be a professor of religion who wound up working for the NSA, which happened at first, and then that sort of transferred into the CIA, because the NSA doesn't really do anything. I mean, there are people that sit in offices and look at computer screens and analyze, you know, phone calls and stuff. They don't kind of go out and get involved in stuff. They just have a lot of information that washes over them. And you know, I think that there's still a lot of opportunity out there for Henry to do stuff that's very interesting as a religious scholar and as a professor of religion and ethics, that will be pertinent to his work in the CIA, because you know, we've seen him before, and hopefully we'll see him again struggle with the ethics of a lot of the stuff that the CIA does. They coerce people. They often, you know, do things or reveal things that can be damaging to people's lives in order to get information or activity that they want. And I think that it's lovely and interesting to see a character wrestle with that stuff. I encourage the writers to remember that this man is a professor of religion and a professor of ethics, and not a sort of a hard-bitten gumshoe. He's not a guy that did training at Langley or wherever CIA agents train.
He was a Marine, though, too.
He was a Marine, yes. That said, he's a thoughtful Marine. He's a thoughtful Marine. He's a thoughtful Catholic. He's a thoughtful guy. I mean, I've said this before, too, so I apologize if you've read this someplace, but, you know, the thing that I've learned from Henry is that as a man who has a very strong moral and ethical center, that those things are not fixed in stone. Being an ethical person is not saying, these are my rules and I will never break them. It's saying, these are my rules and I won't break them until the circumstances force me or compel me to do so. It's a practice. It's something you have to constantly re-examine, and I think that's good for me in my life, and I think it's good for the character, and maybe good for a few people who are thinking deeply about the show, if anyone is.
Yeah, and you mentioned you talked to the writers. I mean, how much input do you have in terms of the character, the way that it's developed over the seasons? I mean, do you get to have a say in storylines, or?
No, I mean, not much. Usually, my input is a reaction to whatever they've written, and I will say that I think that one of the things that I am really impressed with is the writer's ability to generate story and plot. It is endless, and it's so complex. I have no idea what the show's about, by the way. Do not ask me about plot. I can remember some emotional moments, like how people felt, but if you ask me, like, I mean, it's about, like, Russians and Dimitri, I don't know, something happens. I can't really remember. And I think that they, if I had a criticism of them, it's that they burn through story too fast. We raise big questions. I mean, last season, you know, I think we solved the Middle East crisis in 42 minutes. Like, oh, okay, that's easy. So I would love to see these things play out a little longer. But we have a good dialogue about stuff, and mostly I react to what they have.
And the show is a balance between home life scenes and work scenes. I mean, do you have a preference between doing one or the other?
Home life.
Really?
Always.
Because it's more interesting as an actor?
Because it's more interesting as an actor. Because I think that making one of the hallmarks of this show, in my opinion, you may or may not agree, is the authentic depiction of this interesting, complex, difficult, wonderful marriage and wonderful family. And you know, Téa and I and the kids work very hard to make that seem like something that people can identify with. And I think that is what makes the show unique. There are plenty of shows on television that have a lot of plot and intrigue and things blowing up overseas and stuff like that. But there are not a lot that show marriages that are working this well and families that are struggling with stuff that regular people struggle with. In the first season, this was a family who was moving, they were changing jobs, they were moving into a new house, they had kids who were a pain in the ass, all this stuff. That's something that people can really identify with. Being the Secretary of State, that's interesting, but you're a little more removed from the reality of that. And being a religion professor, I've never seen a religion professor on television before, which is another thing that attracted me to this part. Anyway, so it's always the family stuff because that seems more heartfelt and more universal in terms of how people will relate to it.
And how much attention do you pay to what's really going on with the world and how much it mirrors or doesn't mirror what's going on with the show?
How much do I pay attention to what's going on in the world? You're trying to make me cry, aren't you? You're trying to make me cry.
I mean, there have been times when there have been episodes that, you know, kind of prefigured things that happened in the news.
Listen, there was a time when I thought that Barbara Hall or the writers had some kind of mole in Washington because we were doing, people would say, you're doing stories that are ripped from the headlines. And I would say, no, we filmed this 6 weeks ago, you know, and it's happening now. So it seemed as though there was a crystal ball in the writers' room. They were making up things that eventually came true. And then the world went insane. And so now we're doing a show. In the beginning, we were doing an exciting political show, and now we're doing a nice, calm political show that depicts politics and the world in Washington as something that actually functions in a regular way. And I think it's become a relief for people to watch rather than something to get them all excited. Because, you know, you open the newspaper every day and it's like, what next?
But you're still reacting to what's going on. I mean, the first episode obviously deals a lot with the sort of concept of fake news, and that's something that's really come up, you know, within the last year or two in a big way. Does that interest you to be able to sort of comment on what's going on through the show?
It does. I'm always reticent to say that television can have an effect on an audience that's really positive or significant. And maybe I'm underestimating it, but I think it's great if we can examine things in a way that plants a seed in people's minds that makes them think more deeply about the issues of the day. So yeah, of course we'll do that. We will look at things that are going on. I mean, we sort of stumbled into the whole Russia of it all, not knowing that was going to become such an important part of our daily news cycle, and we continue to deal with that.
And how do you kind of balance work and home? I mean, do you bring home work with you, or do you kind of leave it on the set and have a real strong kind of separation between work and home life?
It sort of depends on the day. If it's a good day at work and things go well, then it's, you know, I leave it behind me. If I'm, you know, upset about a rewrite, or if a director is driving me crazy, or, you know, if somebody didn't know their lines and it took forever, then I might, you know, I'm a human being. It's like we all, sometimes we come home from work, we're fine. Sometimes we're pissed off. It's kind of, you know, there's nothing particularly unique about that in terms of being an actor.
Yeah. And this episode, you were working with a young director named Morgan Freeman, who also appeared in the episode. I know he's an executive producer of the show.
I call him Mofotis. Yeah.
What's it like when he's on the set? I mean, do you feel his presence, you know, when he's
all right. I mean, he hangs around, you know, whatever. No, Morgan, you know, Morgan is sort of exactly what you'd expect. He's really smart, really caring, interesting, funny person who, I hate saying this because it sounds like a line, but Morgan has it. You know, Morgan shows up and you go, who is that guy? I want to talk to him. And that you see it in his work on screen, but it's also true in real life. You just want to hang out with him and see what he has to say.
Absolutely, yeah. So this is not just about Madam Secretary. We want to talk about your entire amazing career that you've had, retrospective.
Yeah, a retrospective, that means I'm old. I started retrospective, like, oh, just wheel them in and getting it. But I'm not wheeled in, I'm actually walking. I don't know if you know, I broke my leg.
Yeah, we were going to ask about that.
Yeah, I can walk again like a big boy.
So you were raised by actors. Your parents both acted. Your sister, Tyne, is an actor. Did you ever think about doing anything else, or was it always going to be acting for you?
I never thought about acting.
Really?
No, I thought about being an astronaut and a fireman and a policeman and a doctor and a lawyer and a cowboy and an Indian, and I thought about doing all those things. And I played really hard. I had a really overactive imagination. And to me, actors were, I knew that people did it because they were wandering around my living room, but I just thought they were kind of drunken adults, you know, who would not give me dinner because they were telling stories, you know. It's like, Mom, can we have dinner? And they were very interesting. And then when my sister went to acting school, you know, I was maybe 10, and she would bring home people, because I lived outside of Manhattan, about 30 miles away, and she would bring her acting school friends home to my house, which was sort of, I mean, it was in Suffern, New York, it's in Rockland County, but to them it was the country. It seemed like a vacation. And they would sit around and drink and smoke pot and have these really pretentious conversations about theater and literature and stuff. And I was fascinated by them, especially the pretty girls. I liked them. But I didn't think about acting at all until maybe my freshman year in high school. I played Malvolio in Twelfth Night, which is a play that I would, or a part that I would never be cast for normally. And, sorry, what? Oh, that's her favorite Shakespeare. And after the play, my parents both came and they said, it took us about half an hour into the play to realize it was you. And I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. I could pull the wool over my parents' eyes as well as other people's. And I did know that I loved the theater. I mean, I have no business being here. I should be in the theater. I'm just saying, I'm sorry. I love working in TV and movies, but I should be in the theater where you tell the story with the people in the room. It's much more interesting. Anyway, when I was a kid, I would go with my dad when he did summer stock, and that was a place where I really got the magic of it, because this is, you know, a million years ago when, you know, before people sued each other for everything. So as a 7-year-old, I could crawl around and be up in the fly loft and hide in the wings and look, and it was this wonderful deception of all these people, and I would learn every line, and so I loved being in that room. Anyway, it's a long story of saying it took me a while to kind of get around to it.
Well, if the internet is...
I'll tell you, sorry, let me tell you one thing.
Sure.
So when I was in college, I decided this is what I was going to pursue, and I did a lot of theater. And I had a professor at one point that there was an assignment to write a poem, and it had some limits on it. It wasn't a haiku, but it was something like that. It had a few syllables. And I wrote this poem that I think is sort of sums me up and sums up why I became an actor and why and who I am. And the poem was just this: what he could not do, he pretended to. So there's my epitaph.
It's a pretty good poem, too. You could have been a poet, I think, maybe. I was going to ask you, I read something on the internet that may or may not be true, but that your first role was opposite your father in a TV production of Enemy of the People?
Yes, sort of. I mean, PBS used to make these things called, they used to do these plays, basically. So it was Ibsen's Enemy of the People, and they shot it with 3 or 4 cameras in big chunks, half-an-hour chunks, and it was like doing a play. And there was no money, and they had some kid who was a pain in the ass, and so they fired him. And my dad said, well, maybe my son could do this part. I had no interest whatsoever, except that I was like, sure, whatever, I'll go and do it. So I ended up doing it, and I had a great time, and they paid me money, which was crazy. But it had no influence on my career whatsoever, no. Other than I got to watch my dad work and see how much people admired him and how good he was.
And it was adapted by Arthur Miller, I read, too. It's a pretty good start for a 10-year-old. I mean...
Oh, I'd forgotten that part. That is pretty good. I'm putting that back in my resume.
Well, I mean, you had a lot of good projects early on. I mean, what was the role that got you your sidecar? Would it have been Diner, or was it before that or after that? Do you remember?
It must have been Diner.
Yeah.
I graduated from college, and I came to New York, and I had a little construction company. I was building lofts in Soho and Tribeca. And you have to imagine these lofts were not for hedge fund guys. These were for artists, right? These crappy lofts. And I'd sort of given myself a time limit. I said, if I don't start making a living as an actor within a certain number of years, I will pursue something else. God knows what that would have been. Anyway, so I got Diner, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was clueless about film, and I remember really specifically not knowing, you're all actors, right? You're in this room, all SAG members. Not knowing that you had to hit a mark, that someone put, I knew that people were putting tape down, but I didn't really know why. And honestly, I kept fucking it up, right? They were like, cut, okay, Tim, you gotta hit your mark. I'm like, my mark? What do you mean my mark? And they're like, that tape. I'm like, oh. And they said, do you want us to put sandbags down? I was like, sandbags? Well, I had no idea what was going on. And then someone explained to me that I had to be in focus and I couldn't just wander around like on the stage. And so I would walk the streets of New York. I would play this game. This is after Diner, where I would walk the streets of New York, and you know the joints in the sidewalk. I would say, okay, I'm gonna look over here and see if I can walk up to the 4th joint in the sidewalk and stop. And now you can ask the crew of Madam Secretary. I do not need marks. I am so good at it now. I will be in the same place every freaking time because I don't want to be out of focus. Especially if I do something good, interesting as an actor. That's nothing worse than that. Anyway, yeah, I mean, I guess that kind of, honestly, I never expected to act in film or television. I was going to be a theater actor. So I made Diner, and then I went to Trinity Rep in Providence, Rhode Island, where I became a member of their permanent company, much to the chagrin of my agent and manager, who were like, get back to New York or to LA, you've got to capitalize on this. And then I got offered a TV show, and I still didn't know what I was doing. I still don't know what I'm doing. But I'm happy to be doing it.
When you were making Diner, I mean, that movie has turned out to be a classic. The cast were mostly unknowns who have all gone on to do amazing things. I mean, did you have a sense at the time this was kind of a special project, or were you just trying to hit your mark and not really thinking about?
I had no idea. You know, MGM, who I think was out of business at the time, a movie had come out called Porky's, which is about a bunch of young men that did stupid things, and I had made a lot of money, and they thought they were getting Porky's. And, you know, it was Barry Levinson's first movie, and he had a whole different take, and, you know, Diner was sort of a template for a lot of the comedy that's come since, especially the comedy that's about nothing. You know, guys hanging out, just bullshitting about stuff. And so nobody knew what it was. and we all wanted it to be something, but it almost didn't get released. As I recall, there was a screening in Long Island, and Pauline Kael saw it, and she wrote a letter to MGM saying, you got to release this. And they were like, all right, whatever. They were going to shelve it. And it came out, and it launched a lot of careers.
And have you kept in touch with people? I know you worked with Barry Levinson on a documentary 10 years ago or so. I mean, was that kind of a bonding experience for you guys early on?
Well, it was an interesting experience. Barry's an interesting guy. We'll talk. But, you know, I love Barry. He's very smart and very opinionated. And, you know, it was just interesting to work with him again because he has such a unique vision for his work. So being his producer was an interesting exercise for me. Anyway, but it was fun. We had a really good time. It was a very interesting movie that you should see because it predicts a lot of the stuff that's going on now. It's called Pollywood, and it's about the collision of politics and Hollywood and celebrity. And it follows me in this organization that I'm the president of called the Creative Coalition Around at the Democratic and Republican National Convention, and I think it might be a little bit at the inauguration, stuff like that. It's fascinating and not perfect, but good. Anyway, what was your question? Oh, Barry, yeah. That was good.
And the
Barry,
cast, too.
The cast, I mean, I run into Gutenberg from time to time, and Kevin and I email from time to time, and Danny Stern, you know, I donated money. His kid is in the congressman in the state, in the state of California. And who else? Barkin, I haven't seen in a million years. I ran into her at Sundance. But yeah, I mean, it's that thing, you know, you guys all know this, that actors, our currency is our lives and our experiences and our emotions. So we get together and it's like, we tell all our stories, we reveal ourselves, we spread ourselves bare, and we get to know each other really well, really fast. And then we don't see each other for 10 or 15 years. And when we see each other, it's like it's the next day. So I would love to see any of them. I'm sure we'd, you know, have fond feelings and memories of that time.
And another interesting person that you've worked with a couple times over the years, David Chase. The first TV series I think that you were a regular on, he created called Almost Grown. Didn't last very long, but it was a very acclaimed show. And then he came back around and you were on The Sopranos and got an Emmy nomination for that. What has your relationship been like with him over the years?
I like to tease him and say I worked with him before he was a genius and after he was a genius. But it's funny. Almost Grown was it was an actor's dream. It was a dream for me because, and I haven't seen it in a million years, so it might be really embarrassing, but in any given show, I played between age 17 and age 40. So it was hair, makeup, different, you know, cars and periods. It was really, really fun and difficult. And it was on CBS, and they didn't know what. I mean, you know, if you got up and peed in those days and came back, you didn't know what the hell was going on. Like, what happened? This guy was 17 years old, and then I pee, and now he's like 40. What's going on in this show? It's not like having a DVR where you can pause it. So, you know, it didn't last because it was way ahead of its time. And I love David. I get him. I will never forget, I did the first thing that he ever directed, and they were remaking Alfred Hitchcock Presents episodes. I'm old. Alfred Hitchcock did these shows. Anyway, they were remaking them, and David was directing one at Universal, and it was called Enough Rope for Two. And I played this kind of yuppie guy that gets shot with a gun and put in a hole in the desert. So I came in to read for him, and I did the reading, and I said, thank you very much. And as I was closing the door, I had the script in my hand, and I turned to the secretary who was sitting there, and I said, well, that is one job I don't have to worry about getting. And I threw the script in the wastebasket and drove home. I had the offer by the time I went home. And I was stumped. I said, David, I thought you hated me. And he said, no, that's just my face. He said, people have said that to me my whole life. It's just, that's my face. What is it called? Resting bitch face? He's the poster boy. And so then he hired me for Almost Grown, and then eventually, and The Sopranos was funny because I went. He invited me to the premiere. They did a little screening in L.A. And I saw it, and I walked out there with my mouth open. He was like, "What did you think?" I was like, "David, this is freaking brilliant." He goes, it's 8 views off. No one's going to see it. CBS turned it down. The assholes, you know. I was like, David, no. Just trust me. Just wait. And it turned into The Sopranos. And then every year he would call me and say, I have this part I want you to play. And he would start to describe it. And then he'd go like, you know what? No, never mind. No, it's not. That's not right. I'm like, wait. Keep going. He's like, no, it's not good enough. So he finally, and this is a good example of a writer's mind, because he wrote this part for me, right? And the guy's name, when I got the script, was T.J. Dolan. And so then these pages came out, you know, the blue page or something, and it changed to J.T. Dolan. And I was like, why did he change it? And I realized that he remembered that my real name is not Timothy James Daly, it's James Timothy Daly. So he changed the initials so that they would match up with me. He changed the hometown of the guy to like Mahwah, New Jersey, because he knew that I grew up in Suffern, New York, which is the same town as Mahwah, New Jersey. So he remembered all this stuff about me and all these conversations we'd had, and made that part for me. So that was a great experience.
But the character was kind of a little sleazy, though. I mean, it's kind of a screenwriter.
That character is more like me than any character I've ever played. I'm glad you're laughing, because that's true.
Well, I've read you say that.
Let me just tell you,
yeah.
if you wrote a biography of Tim Daly, you would be wrong. This belies the real thing.
Well, I've read you say that before, that you feel like your looks in some ways have limited the types of roles that you've gotten. So when you get to play a role like The Sopranos, or you got to play David Koresh in a TV movie, I mean, does that feel like you're kind of released and able to do more, you know, more kind of the things that you like to do?
Well, I think, yeah. I think that, you know, this sounds like one of these bullshit things that actors say, but I am a much better character actor than I am a leading man. It's very hard for me to figure, you know, leading men are playing in a bandwidth that's kind of in the middle. And to make the middle interesting is my challenge. It's very hard for me to do that. Some people do it extraordinarily well. It's easier for me, and I think I have more talent when I'm doing something that's up here or down here. So if I get to immerse myself, that's why I do theater all the time, because I'm allowed to do things that are a lot more adventurous there for whatever reason. And every once in a while, I've gotten to do something in film or television, but I need to go there because I'm freed of you know, whatever this sort of organized look is that I have.
And we're jumping back and forth in time here a little bit, but you spent 8 seasons on Wings.
I did.
Very good show, very good cast. Did you find the sitcom format limiting after a while, or how did you keep it interesting for all those years? I mean,
well, it's funny. One of my many regrets is it's not that big a regret, but every once in a while I go back and I look at Wings, and Wings was a fucking good show. It was hilarious, and I look at it now. Every once in a while, you know, I can't sleep, and I'll stumble on it at 3:30 in the morning, and I'll look and I'll think, God, that young man is really funny. He's very good, and it's me. but when I was doing it, and it was interesting because we were all real actors. You know, we were all people that wanted to explore every corner of the human experience. Weber, Tony Shalhoub, you know, David Schramm, even Tommy Church, and so there was always one of us who was hanging by their fingertips off the ledge, who was like, I can't do this, because a sitcom, even if it's brilliant, explores this much of life. Even if it's incredible. It never goes over here, and it never goes over here. So there was one of us that was always yearning to do that other thing, to do that dark thing or that crazy thing. And so, yes, it felt limiting, but as I look back on it, it was very good. And I know why sitcoms are so bad now, having looked at Wings. and I'll tell you about it.
Why is
later.
That? You can't tell us why?
Well, for me, the most of it is direction. The actors on sitcoms now, in multi-camera, which there aren't very many, they aren't given activities. Wings was at work. People were doing stuff as they were doing the jokes, and it buried bad writing, and it enhanced the believability of these people who were doing these funny things. I've seen all these shows now where actors stand in a semicircle and they deliver the jokes to each other, and it's just lazy. They're not working out activities that make it seem like you're in a real place with real people doing real things. That's my little. I mean, I could be wrong.
No, I think that's very, very wise. So I wanted to ask you about The Fugitive, too. You took on that role for a season, I think got a Screen Actors Guild nomination or a Golden Globe nomination?
Yeah, Screen Actors Guild.
Yes. And it was a very good show, but it must have been tough for you to step into a role that was so iconic, not just by David Jansen, but also by Harrison Ford. So how did you approach that? Did you just kind of put it out of your mind and just start with a blank slate? Or?
I totally put it out of my mind, started with a blank slate. And, you know, it's funny about that because everybody thought that was going to be a gigantic hit. It was the highest testing, it was tied, actually, for the highest testing show in the history of Warner Brothers Television with ER. So everybody, you know, I thought this is it. This is going to be some sort of big ticket. And then it fizzled, I think, because it was on the precipice of a big sea change in society, which was that, first of all, it's kind of repetitive, you know. Guy goes into town, he's a stranger, he makes friends, blah, blah, blah. The detective shows up, he goes on the run. It's sort of over and over again. And, you know, what was lurking in the corner was CSI, which is all these screens and video things and cell phones. And I think that the collective conscience was attuned to what was coming, the modern stuff. But my approach to it was it would be my own, and if I borrowed something from either one of those other actors, it was only accidental. I will say my father was on the original Fugitive twice, playing completely different characters. Oh, yeah? Yeah, he was killed one time doing something, they liked him, so they brought him back, and got killed doing something else.
And then you had a nice long run on Private Practice as well.
Yes.
How did you enjoy doing that more kind of serialized soap opera-ish kind of primetime series?
Private Practice was one of the most soul-sucking experiences of my career. It was a horror for me.
Really?
It was. I don't know how I survived that period, other than the fact that I knew I was going to get my children through college without student loan debt. But yeah, I did not like it. I liked it for a minute. But for me, that entire exercise was expectations unmet. And my expectations were high, and those high expectations were fueled by people who could fuel that excitement. And it was never met for me. So to me, that was if there was a time in my career when I felt that I was, you know, in a mine stacking up chips for something else, it was then. But it was hard because, you know, I may be totally fooling myself, but I have worked for a long time, and I've gotten some experience, and I've you know, got a little, you know, wear on the tread, and I thought, this is the time of my career when I am the most ready to be an expert actor, to really do something special. And I was stuck in a mire of something that I didn't believe in, and that was tough.
So did you have hesitation to sign on for another series when Madam Secretary came around? I mean, I know Tyne had worked with Barbara Hall before, I think, on Judging Amy. Did you talk to her and say, like, is this going to be a good situation for me?
Of course. I mean, listen, I think that any sane actor, when you sign up for a series, well, maybe if you're 23, you know, you're like, yeah, you just go and you don't think twice. But if you've done a series before, you will think hard about it, because you know that there are wonderful things about it and there are pitfalls to it. The wonderful things are you have a steady job, you get to know the people, you become this family, you know, you make money, you don't have to scratch and claw for rent. And the pitfall is that you are playing the same part for a long period of time, potentially. And it can be tough. I mean, even now, in the 4th season of Madam Secretary, we're all still really after it. And yet, you walk into a set and you go like, okay, I sat over there, and I went to the sink, and I've been at the fridge, and I've been in the bed, and like, where do I go now? Like, what is the new place? You know, I've been angry, I've been sad, I've been happy, I've been sexy, I've been, like, where is my next challenge? And it becomes difficult after a while to sort of keep that creative flame lit.
I know that Téa was concerned about it too. I've spoken to her before, and she said that, you know, she said to Barbara, like, if he starts having an affair with a student in the 3rd week, you know, I'm out of here. So, I mean, did you feel like you had collaborators who were on the same page in terms of wanting it to be, you know, more than just kind of a, you know, a soap opera kind of show?
On Madam Secretary?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't think Madam Secretary was ever conceived. I don't think there's many soapy areas of the show. I had an instinct right from the beginning, as I said, that this marriage was going to be something special. And then, of course, I met Téa, and I knew that we had something, you know, going that was going to be really good in terms of portraying these two people who were really dedicated to whatever this was, despite all the challenges. So I didn't think there was going to be anything soapy about it. And, you know, I'll tell you, you know, this is interesting. Téa and I went to the same high school 10 years apart. And I'm a person who's interested in everything that goes on a set, and I like being involved and you know, bothering people about what they're doing. And when we were doing the pilot, we were doing a dinner table scene. And for those of you who have done dinner table scenes, you know they're a real pain in the ass, because people are passing food and eating and stuff is going on, and then they say cut, and then you have to do it all again. So you have to get all the food back and get all the water glasses filled and like this. So we did one take, and they said, cut, let's go again. And I was like scraping the food off my plate and passing the bowl and saying, give me that, and filling my water glass, putting my silverware back, folding my napkin back up. And I looked across the table, and Téa was doing the exact same thing. And I thought, okay, that's a cool kid, right? She's not standing there going like, props, do my thing. She was participating because she wanted to act. I think that I have encountered actors in my career who like spending time in a motorhome making phone calls. I don't like doing that. I like acting. And that's why, you know, I mean, the bigger the budget a movie or a TV show is, the more time you spend waiting in a motorhome. You know, some people complain about the speed of TV, but at least you get to act most of the day. You don't have to wait most of the day.
And I guess that's why you like theater too, is that when you're acting, it's kind of an unbroken experience.
Well, look, you get to, I mean, you know, I didn't see the premiere episode tonight because I wanted to appear here as sort of a seasoned, confident, you know, professional actor, and not an insecure puddle of, you know, despair. Because, you know, when you do television or movies, you do a performance and you think, oh, that was great, that moment when, and then you watch and it's like, that moment, where did that moment? They cut my moment, right? And so then you want to jump off a bridge. And so I know myself well enough to know that I have to wait until I can't remember what it was about, and I can't remember that precious moment that I loved. But in the theater, you get to tell the story from beginning to end. I did a play with Tyne this spring that was fabulous. It's such a great play, and I think we're going to do it in New York, hopefully next year. Yeah. And I also like being in the room with the people who you're telling the story to, because you get this special sense of camaraderie. You're a bunch of strangers locked into a dark place, and you never know what it's going to be. Some nights it's electric and fantastic, and some nights, you know, you don't know if the audience is actually alive. But it's always something different. Things go wrong, which is exciting. That said, I guess what I'm saying is that I like acting. I like what happens between action and cut. And I think as a human being, I'm very, very, almost perfectly suited to acting and very ill-suited to being an actor.
Interesting. And what was it like working with your sister on stage? I mean, she's your big sister, but you've both been doing it for a long time. I mean, what's the dynamic like when you're out there?
You know, it was really great because obviously Tyne is an amazing actress, but we work in a very similar way. And it's funny because people come up to me all the time. Maybe this is because of some of the roles that Tyne has played, and they say like, "Whoa, Tyne, she's such a powerhouse." And I'm like, "Really? Tyne?" Because she's just my sister, right? So if she pulls any shit with me, I'm like, "Tyne, cut this shit. Stop it. You know, get over yourself. Let's go." And she's like, okay. So there's that dynamic too. But we laughed a lot, and we got to know each other really well because she's 10 years older. So, and this is touched upon in the play also, because we play brother and sister. But even if you're not 10 years apart, you can have the same parents, and they're utterly different parents because of where they are in their lives, what's going on, you know, your age, your sex, all that stuff. So we told each other a lot about who our parents were.
That's interesting. Yeah. So who were your role models growing up as an actor? I mean, aside from family members, who did you kind of look up to and maybe emulate when you were starting out?
You know, this is a question that I get asked a lot, and I have to say it's weird because I was never a fan. I was never, I mean, I think the closest maybe I came was Steve McQueen in The Great Escape. That thing he did with the baseball mitt, you know, he threw the ball. Do you remember this? Is a long time ago. If you haven't seen The Great Escape, see it. It's a fantastic movie. But I, you know, there was a lot of talk at my dinner table about actors and literature and performances and so I don't know. It was always specific to me. I never thought one actor was the be-all, end-all. I liked performances, and I didn't like performances. And I liked it when actors that I thought were great gave bad performances, because I think that ultimately it's not only an artist's right, but their responsibility to fail. Because it's a place where you can fail and nobody gets hurt. And I think that that's true, especially of people who aren't professional actors or artists. Failure is such a wonderful tool and such a wonderful learning experience, and it's ultimately comforting to know that you can do it and survive.
And did you get encouragement or discouragement or seek advice from your family members, or did you try to?
Well, I've told this story a million times also, but in my family, the theater was our church, our temple, the place of worship. So if you entered into that space, you were not to take it lightly. So when I was in the second grade and I was in the school play, I would look around at all my classmates, and they would all have their parents and grandparents giving them candies and balloons and saying, "Oh, you're so cute, the best, I love you, blah, blah, blah." And I would get notes. You know, listen, if you just hold till you cross stage left and then say that line, you might get a laugh. Okay, Dad. And like, So it was tough. It wasn't a place that you went to kind of mess around. Yeah. And my dad, at one point, he came and saw me in a play in college, and he said, "That's it, I'm not paying for your education, you're out." And I was like, "Oh, okay, Dad." And then he came and saw me in another play, and he's like, "You were wonderful, this is great, I'll pay for your next semester." So, you know, it had its advantages and its trepidation. Oh, I got to tell you one story. Since we're talking about my sister Tyne, I have to tell you a great story about my sister Tyne. So I was still in college, And I got hired to do this Shaw play called Arms and the Man. And I played the Russian soldier, right? And because I had a professor who was a professional director. And it was at the Poinciana Playhouse in Palm Beach, Florida. And the average age of the audience was deceased. And I had this great costume, right? And I played the Russian soldier. I talked like this, like Dmitri. And Tyne, before she was, no one knew who she was just a workaday actress, was doing a play called Vanities at, I shit you not, the Burt Reynolds Dinner Theater in Jupiter, Florida, with Sally Field and an actress named Gail Strickland. So I went and saw her play, and she came and saw my show on closing night. And she came back afterwards, and she said all nice things about me, and she said, Tim, you got to steal that hat. It's fantastic. It was this kind of tight black wool hat. And I said, Tyne, I'm not stealing the hat. This is my first professional job. I'm not going to steal a costume. She goes, no. You got to steal that hat. I am telling you. I said, Tyne, I'm not stealing the fucking hat. It's my first job. Like, what if they come after me? She said, you don't understand. It is an actor's obligation to steal articles of their costume that they think are great. Case in point. Wearing it. Check out season 2 and 3. And so I said, Tyne, I'm not stealing it. She said, all right, whatever. So cut to about 6 or 7 years later, and I'm making my Broadway debut. I'm doing a play called Coastal Disturbances with Annette Bening. And we had done it off-Broadway. We already got amazing reviews. We were a big hit. And I go over to Sardi's. The traditional restaurant where they have the party, and I'm there, and it's all very wonderful. My mom is there, and there's this box, and it's from Tyne, and I open it up. It's the hat. She stole the hat, and she waited for 6 years for the appropriate moment, and she gave it to me. Isn't that great? That's a good kid.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I will tell you one other story about that night. Now that I think of it, that was sort of a profound night. I was walking across Broadway with my mom, who had been an actress and then quit when she had babies and dedicated her life to my father's career. Even after they were divorced, she would, my dad would call her up and she would come and basically teach him parts. And we're walking across Broadway, and she said, you know what, Timmy? And I said, what? And she said, I think you're going to be better than your dad. And I stopped in the middle of the Broadway, and she kept going. And I just, I mean, what a moment.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good mother, I think. Yeah. You've worked with so many amazing actors over the years. Are there a few that stand out in your mind as having the most impact on you, either as an actor or just as a person to have spent time with him?
Oh, boy. Ossie Davis. Yeah, Ossie Davis. What a man. What an accomplished, interesting man. I don't think we talk about him enough in terms of being an actor, a director, a writer, an author. I mean, just an incredible guy. So I would say Ossie.
What did you work with him on?
Well, this is going to sound ridiculous. I had this miniseries called Queen, which is Alex Haley's father's side of the story of Roots. And so my parents were Martin Sheen and Anne Margaret. My daughter was Halle Berry. And it was kind of a wild thing, but a good story. And just don't beat me up for this, but Ossie played one of my slaves because I played a plantation owner, right? And he was just the smartest, most dignified, and interesting guy I can imagine.
Yeah. We're just about out of time. I just wanted to get to at least one of the questions from the audience here.
Oh, they wrote them down?
They're written down, yes. This is from Carol London. How have you been able to be a part of a TV series in every decade? Your portrayal of characters always matches the decade that you're in.
Gosh, I don't know. It's just luck. I remember when I after I did Diner and I was in Rhode Island, I walked doing theater. I walked past a bus stop and it said, this is kind of a bumper sticker, but it said, "Luck is where opportunity meets preparation." So I just try to stay ready and hope that luck hovers over me and I get to do something good. I don't know. I hope to do maybe a TV series in another decade also. We'll see what that's like. And put me in a walker.
Well, I think we're lucky to have had you here with us tonight, and thanks for taking the time.
That's it?
Tim
Oh,
Daly.
gosh. Okay. Bye. Thanks.